There is a serious situation, a serious problem that is transpiring here in Canada. And this serious situation, it affects all of us on an individual level. Whether you're a mother, a father, a student, a police officer, a mayor, I don't care what designation you have in law, this is affecting all of us. All of us, as individuals, are born with fundamental rights and freedoms. Natural law is real law, and natural law brings forth natural right. Now, listen to the definition of what a natural right is. It is a right that is conceived as part of natural law, and that is therefore thought to exist independently of rights created by government or society. Now, a natural right can express itself such as the right to life, liberty, and property. So a natural right, it exists apart and independent from the government. The government doesn't create this right. They have to acknowledge and recognize this right. However, they do not create this right. Now, in law, there are other rights. These are rights or duties or privileges, depending how you want to look at it, that stem from enactments and regulations. These are government-created laws. So all of us, as individuals, we possess natural rights. We possess fundamental rights. Now, these rights are inalienable to who we are. Now, the definition of inalienable with an INALIENABLE, inalienable, is a right that cannot be transferred or surrendered. A natural right. So you see, we all have a right, inalienable rights, that cannot be transferred, neither can it be surrendered. Now, look at the definition of an absolute right. This is a right that belongs to every human being. Now, they qualify it. They state it, that an absolute right is a right that belongs to every human being, such as the right of personal liberty. This is a natural right. Now, here in Canada, we were never taught our fundamental human rights and freedoms. We were never taught what natural rights are, even though we went to school and we were given an education by this government called Canada within the context, within the documents that they provided for our education. We were never explained our fundamental human rights and freedoms. Now, this is a serious problem. When we reached a proper age, our parents informed us and told us that we were going to be sent to somewhere called school. And the purpose of going to this school was to be that we were going to get an education. We were going to be educated. Now, the government, as I said before, is the one who controlled the curriculum to this education. They are the ones who decided what students would be taught. So when I went into grade 1, through their enactments, through their regulations, they decided what to teach a person, an individual in grade 1, what an individual should be taught in grade 2. Basically, what was transpiring is the government was controlling what they were feeding you, what they were educating your mind and educating your inner being. Now, this education was geared strictly and only towards your focus or your ability to operate in this society. You see, when we were in school, we used to talk among one another and say, well, I'm here to get an education. I know I have to get a job when I leave school, and I'm hoping to find a spouse, husband or a wife, and to have a family, to have a home, and to get a job. So that's why I need education. I have to be able to function in the society, therefore that's why I'm here. That was the purpose of our education. However, we were never taught our fundamental human rights and freedoms while we were in school. Now, international law teaches us and tells us that Canada had the obligation to teach us our fundamental human rights and freedoms. These rights that are absolute, these rights that belong to us as human beings, that can never be transferred and never be removed from us. Canada was supposed to teach us what these rights were, but they never did. Looking into international law, into a specific article of law, from the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, Article 13. This law is binding upon Canada. They had the obligation to take whatever is written here and transfer it into domestic law to find the expression of this law within Canada. Now I'm going to read it to you. Article 13. The states, parties, meaning Canada, to the present covenant, recognize the right of everyone to an education. Now I want you to notice first and foremost who they're talking about here. They brought forth the player or the subject, everyone. It didn't say a person. It said the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an education. They agree that education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity, and shall strengthen the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, this is legal language. If I was to put it in common language, it's saying that the state parties recognize that everyone, the human being, must be taught fundamental rights and freedoms, must be taught human rights and freedoms. Now, the verse further goes on, and I quote, they further agree, so secondarily, they further agree that education shall enable all persons. Now notice it's persons to participate effectively in a free society. So, as you have learned from my videos, or maybe you haven't watched my videos, you are not recognized as a human being. Here in Canada, you are been rendered a subject and a servant of Her Majesty. You are considered an artificial person in law. Now, this artificial person has to function in law. So they needed an education in order to participate effectively in this free society. So you went to school now, and the school treated you only as a person. They said, okay, well, you have to go out there and you have to work, you have to get a job, you have to be able to participate in the society. So if you want to be a plumber, we will educate you to be a plumber. Next, if the man wanted or the woman wanted to be a lawyer, they would educate that individual to become a lawyer. But that education was geared to focus or prepare that person to participate in society. And through that education, they never once taught us our fundamental human rights and freedoms. They never approached us from the point of view or the aspect as a human being and teach us what are our natural rights, our inalienable rights. They just said, you're a person, we need to prepare you for work. So by now, some would be saying, "Well, yeah, that's normal. That's what has to be transpiring here in Canada. I have to go to school. I have to get an education. I have to go to work. What's this guy talking about? If you haven't caught, if you don't understand about what's transpiring against you personally, against your family, against your loved ones, you see, first of all, work was never an obligation for your life. Okay, when you were born, let me ask you this question. When you were born, regardless of the consequences, I'm not asking you how would you provide for yourself at this point of time. That's not the question I'm bringing forth here. The question that I'm bringing forth is that when you were born, when you began to grow up, apart from others telling you that you need to go to school, get an education, to work, to provide for your so-called needs, did you have this already implanted inside of you? No. You didn't. You weren't a young child running around playing, say, I'm going to work one day, I'm going to work one day, I'm going to work one day. No. You were enjoying life, you were pursuing happiness, you were enjoying yourself. Now, I want to draw your attention to an article of law that is an international article of law that is binding upon Canada. Now, before I read this, I want to share or explain this to you. A right never produces an obligation. I've said this before in my other videos, and I've used the citizen of Canada as an example, and I'll explain it again. Come voting time, the citizen of Canada, do the police come to the door and knock on the door and say, hey, it's election time? Go and exercise your right to vote. You as a citizen have the right to vote. You can cast a vote. Now you must go because it's election time, and they draw their guns and force you to go. Of course not, because the citizen has a right to vote. A right never produces an obligation. A right can be exercised, but it does not have to be exercised. So understand that. Whenever you have been given a right or see a right, it's something that can be exercised, but no one can force you to exercise it. Now, the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, Article 6. Listen to the wording of this. The state parties to the present covenant recognize the right to work, which includes the right of everyone, the opportunity to gain his living by work which he freely chooses or accepts, and will take the appropriate steps to safeguard this right. So Canada has to recognize the right to work. And this right includes the opportunity for you to gain your living if you choose to work. And they're saying that you are freely choosing and accepting to work. Now, does a right produce an obligation? No. Now, some again would say, well, what's going on here? If I don't work, how am I going to provide for myself? The welfare systems are not worth anything here. The social systems are not good. You should get up and work. I agree. Just life in general is about working. But this is not what I'm talking about. And this is not what international law is talking about. And this has to do with freedoms, fundamental freedoms. The state parties to the present covenant recognize the right to work. I, Canada, I play the position. I recognize you, Billy, or you, Jane, have the right to work. Now, is this an obligation? Can I force you to work? No. But I can make social systems that are weak, that do not support you, that do not produce an adequate living on your behalf, that will motivate you or force you to get up and work. Now, in order to get up and work, the purpose for this is for you to pursue an adequate living, to pursue money so that you can go and buy clothing, food, hydro, housing, to shelter from the elements. That's the purpose of work. People think that when you exercise your right to work, that you're supposed to go out there and get money, and once you get that money, it's to enjoy life. It's to have happiness. Listen, by the time most of us have finished the 45-hour work week, handled our situations at home with our families, and so forth, we do not have much energy left in order to pursue happiness. Primarily, before that, this law, and the law declares that when you choose freely and accept to work, that whatever monetary money you gain, you get your paycheck, that the purpose of that money now is not for you to entertain yourself. It's not for you to pursue happiness. Now, you can go and do that. That's your choice. But the law says that if you choose to work, then when you get that money, when you get the resources, that is for your living. That is to go for your clothing, your food, your hydro, your shelter, and so forth. That is one avenue, that is one option for you to exercise. You, as a person, can get an education through the schooling. You can go into the society and pursue, earn, or gain a living. And the living that you gain is used for you and your life. Now, just as its citizen has the right to vote and can choose not to exercise the right to vote, well, in this article of law, it says the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right to work. So what happens then if you or I decide that we do not want to exercise the right to work. We choose not to exercise this right. So we have that artificial person that has been given the education that now, in law, it is being said that you have freely chosen and accepted to work, that you're exercising a right to work. But if you reverse all this, when you were back in school, they never taught you any other way. They only taught you from the perspective of that artificial person and that perspective of having to be part of the society. Now remember I said that they never taught you about fundamental human rights and freedoms? Well, contained within your fundamental human rights and freedoms is a way for you to enjoy a life and enjoy a living. Now, I want to draw your attention to the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights. First of all, I want to read the preamble. This is an explanation of what these covenants are about. I want to read a little part of it. It says, recognizing that in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ideal of free human beings enjoying, not pursuing, notice that, enjoying freedom from fear and want can only be achieved if conditions are created. Now, breaking that down, it talks about the idea of a free human being enjoying freedom from fear and want. So they're saying a free human being can enjoy freedom from fear and want. Now, this can only happen if conditions are created. They clearly state it. A free human being can be free from fear and want if conditions are created whereby this human being can enjoy all these rights and not have to pursue after them. That's the explanation of what the covenants are bringing forth, trying to teach us as individuals. Canada is obligated to this. Now we go into part 1, article 1. Now watch. It says all peoples. If you've watched my videos and you understand what's transpiring here, all peoples is that artificial person. A people is a subject and a servant of the political party or of the sovereign. Here in Canada, it's Her Majesty the Queen. Now, all peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue. Now notice, no more enjoying. The person, the people, the artificial person, the one who goes to get an education, who must go out there and function in society, they must pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. They must pursue their living. It is said they choose to work, and by doing that, they're pursuing after their living. Article 3 of the International Covenant states this: the state parties to the present covenant undertake to ensure the equal right, now watch the subject and player here, the equal right of men and women to the enjoyment, not the pursuit, you see that, to the enjoyment of all economic, social, and cultural rights set forth in the present covenant. So, in this present covenant, in the international covenant, our natural rights, our fundamental human rights and freedoms have been expressed, and we have the right to enjoy these rights. Now, staying on this chain of thought, we said, what if we choose not to work? We choose not to exercise the right to work. What happens then? We go down to Article 11. This is a natural right. This is an obligation. This is a fundamental right that you have, and that Canada has an obligation to you and to your family. It says the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. Now, this is part of the right of enjoying. You see, as a man, as a woman, as a human being, the plural of man and woman, You have the right to adequate housing. You have the right to food, to housing, to clothing, to the continued improvement condition of your living. So we have these rights, and we can choose to exercise these rights. Some will say, well, okay, how do we fulfill these rights? Where does the obligation come from? That's another story. You have to learn all this. But just starting in the beginning is to understand that I have the right, as a human being, to adequate living.